Top of the autumnal morning to you. It is Tuesday, September 23rd, the first full day of fall in the Northern Hemisphere. Hope you enjoyed the equinox as it was intended to be celebrated, with overpriced pumpkin spice lattes, apple cider donuts, a few way too early Halloween decorations, and of course, anxiety and trepidation about your favorite baseball team's playoff chances. This is Joe Lemire bringing you the Morning Buzzcast from New York that truthfully feels a bit too warm for the changing season, but oh so pleasant for all of you coming into town for game changers this week in the city. The NFL is shipping up to Dublin for the first time this weekend as the Vikings and Steelers are set to play at Croke Park, which is Europe's third largest stadium with a capacity of more than 82,000 in certain configurations and will host about 76,000 on Sunday. The NFL's managing director of international, Garrett Meyer, reported on a conference call yesterday that more than 600,000 digital devices entered the ticketing queue for the first sale. The AP later noted that a slightly higher share of demand originated from U.S. fans wanting to make the overseas trip than the league has often seen from some of its other international games. There's certainly novelty about going to Dublin for the first time, and no shortage of connections to Ireland. About a third of tickets were sold to fans who do live in Ireland, about a third to U.S. fans, and predictably mostly in Pittsburgh and Minnesota, and about a third sold to the U.K. and the rest of Europe. The NFL is making sure to build as much shoulder programming around the game as well. There's a free 3-day fan event, the NFL Experience, taking place at Dublin City Castle. The Visa-backed NFL Shop will operate at the St. Stephen's Green Shopping Center, and numerous other events are planned, including tailgates, pub takeovers, and so on. The league is using the game as a springboard to spread the word about flag football as well, gifting starter kits to nearly 1,000 schools in the country. While the game itself will air on NFL Network domestically in the U.S., it'll be on Virgin Media in Ireland, the NFL's first free-to-air partner in that country. There are also broadcast partners in the U.K., Germany, and France. One of the interesting case studies about the NFL's European outreach this time is that the Vikings will remain on the continent and play in London the following weekend. While the Jaguars have played consecutive overseas games before, they stayed in London, whereas the Vikes are the first to change countries in the interim. The NFL's Peter O'Reilly explained that it's a good fit for that franchise given how heavily they've leaned into international marketing rights in those territories, and there will be learnings by the team and league about the operations of remaining in Europe and in that time zone. Later this fall, the NFL will wrap its European stint with its very first games not only in the city of Berlin, but also in the country of Spain, with Real Madrid Stadium hosting that one. O'Reilly noted, his team receives roughly daily outreach from cities and groups expressing interest in hosting future NFL games as part of the international roadmap. The league can be very selective going forward about that expansion. Executives on the call were very clear that the prospect of a major event like the Super Bowl, or even the Pro Bowl, won't happen imminently in Europe, but facts are being gathered, temperatures are being taken, interest is being gauged about the long-term viability of such hosting. As the WNBA playoffs continue, some interesting statistics about fan demographics were shared by the New York Times. Here's a thought exercise. Picture the average W fan. If you pictured a young girl or a woman, it turns out you're wrong. According to league-provided data, the W's fan base is 57% male and 43% female. If simpler numbers are easier to visualize, that means out of every 7 fans, 4 are male and 3 are female. Forgive me for being naive, but I might have guessed the ratio went the other way. But it turns out men have accounted for more than half the viewership for a few years now. But the median fan was middle-aged. Now that's skewing much younger than it had before. As the Times wrote, boys under the age of 18 have increased their viewing of WNBA games by more than 130% over the past 4 seasons, with a particular spike in the last 2, in which Caitlin Clark has been a member of the W. That article also quotes Golden State owner Joe Lemire as saying 55% of the Valkyries season ticket holders are male, which tracks pretty closely with the overall percentage of the W fan base. Notably, while on stage at Access Drive last week, Golden State Chief Revenue Officer John Bevan said the overlap between Warriors and Valkyries fans was only a 7% crossover. That means the W franchise is staking out its own unique identity in the market, while admitting that this season was a bit of lightning in a bottle. Bevan added that the best years are certainly ahead of us. He acknowledged that the Valkyries were aggressive and bullish as they went to the market, and it's worked, having sold out all 22 home games in their inaugural season, and when considering the Valkyries and Warriors, they have the chance to lift both boats in this basketball tide, to paraphrase an old metaphor. As he said, we feel like we're expanding our audience and our reach on both sides of the business, and a lot of cross-pollination opportunities as we move forward. But I think from day one we had strong conviction in the value of this asset. In other women's basketball news, Unrivaled began with the first of 9 weekday player reveals. The first half dozen was headlined by WNBA Rookie of the Year Paige Beckers, who in April signed a 3-year deal with Unrivaled that included equity, and thus perhaps made her inclusion somewhat of a foregone conclusion. In total, 54 players will be competing as the league does expand in year 2. And as our Tom Friend has reported, there is a standing offer to Caitlin Clark should she be interested, but there has been no signal yet whether or not she would accept. These player reveals continue through October 1st, so we'll have to keep tuning in. On to the other news from the day. The ACC has joined its Power 4 peers in moving from an 8-game conference season to 9, following the lead of the Big 12, Big 10, and SEC. Also mandated is at least one other game against another Power 4 opponent. The ACC and SEC are now the two that require this 9+1 model, or in some cases in the ACC, an 8+2, because here's where there's just a modicum of math involved. The ACC has 17 football schools, which quite obviously is an odd number, thus not divisible by 2. The greater mental challenge for me is watching my alma mater, Virginia, a long-standing ACC member, go play at NC State, also an ACC denizen, a couple weeks ago in what was technically a non-conference game, whereas this past weekend, Virginia, a school in a commonwealth with a coastal border abutting the Atlantic Ocean, playing Palo Alto, California's Stanford in its actual ACC opener. Not a sentence I expected to utter 20 years ago. But if you're wondering if all this machination is a clear maneuver to generate more revenue, the all-consuming quest for every college athletic program these days, as Abe Madcore reminds us on this podcast almost daily, then you'd be correct. One note is that the conference's revenue distribution model takes TV ratings into account, and certainly conference matchups would help that. Lastly, as expected, MLB owners unanimously approved the sale of the Rays from Stu Sternberg to the group led by Patrick Zalewski for $1.7 billion. Sternberg and his partners will retain about 10% ownership of the franchise after the formal handoff next week. On another baseball note, kudos to the league for recently implementing what's being called the amateur recovery period. For high school players, it'll run from October 15th until January 15th, and for college players from November 15th to January 15th. And it's a period of time in which MLB scouts and analysts will not be able to evaluate players or collect performance data from them. It's designed to give players a chance to properly recover and recuperate. The players are the sport's greatest asset, yet too many pitchers in particular have been getting hurt, with experts ascribing overuse at the amateur level as a key factor. That's all for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Morning Buzzcast. This is Joe Lemire wishing you a great Tuesday.